Thank you so much for coming to another press conference of our group. Here with my colleagues, on my right, my colleague from France, Virginie Geron. Further to the right, my colleague from Lithuania, Stasys Jakialunas, and to my left, Ivan Sinčić from Croatia. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Stasys, from Lithuania. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is part of a gigantic COVID-19 scientific fraud and propaganda campaign that caused and continue to cause massive violations of human rights, freedom, and is a threat to the democracy in Europe. Because of her actions and major conflicts of interest, she should resign from her position as the President of the Commission. Now, some details to support this. As we all know, it's in the media, the President was involved in the private communication with the CEO of Pfizer before signing the purchase agreement with this private company, but refused to disclose the content of this communication. This is a clear violation of principles of transparency and good public administration. Second, according to the disclosed segments of the agreement with Pfizer, and not all parts are disclosed, and which is another violation of the same principles, the European Commission has to coordinate external communication with this private commercial entity and to promote COVID-19 vaccines as the global public good. This is not science, this is not good governance, this is an execution of vaccine business plan, and the President of the European Commission acts as the chief sales representative of this business. Three, as a result of this commitment, Ms. von der Leyen has been actively advocating vaccination as the only way to end the pandemic. This is a lie. There have been efficient and not expensive medical treatment protocols from the start of the pandemic. Now, thousands of doctors around the world are testifying this, but the President of the Commission has been ignoring this all along. Four, Pfizer, after signing the contract with the Commission on May 20, 2021, claimed in their press release that the pandemic is likely to last for several more years and we all will have to be vaccinated a number of times. How can they know that, and why the President of the European Commission has to subscribe to this notion? Number five, the Commission has been cooperating with social networks on so-called fact-checking, in other words, censorship of scientific and public debates about COVID-19. This collaboration was announced as early as 10th of June 2020 and is one of the main driving elements of COVID-19 propaganda. Six, according to the official declaration of interest of President von der Leyen, her husband, Heiko von der Leyen, is the medical director of a biopharmaceutical company, is also an advisor to another company, consulting firm for German and European healthcare market. Since Ms. Ursula von der Leyen is actively involved in active promotion of COVID-19 vaccination business, this is another major conflict of interest of hers. Because of all this, she has to resign from her position as the President of the European Commission, and I call on the leadership of all political groups and leadership of the European Parliament to support this request and to finally create an investigative committee of COVID-19 pandemic. People of the European Union need answers from this Parliament on how and why this pandemic started, how it was managed, and how to prevent it from happening again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stasys. I would like to give the floor now to my colleague Ivan Sinčić from Croatia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Terhes. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear guests. I would like to say a few words about mandates, especially digital COVID certificate mandates and, of course, vaccine mandates, especially in the light of an idea that comes from the European institutions about prolonging for 1 year, that means to 2023, the digital COVID certificate. I will say it loud and clear, we are strongly against that. Digital COVID certificate has been proven completely useless, not just useless, it was proven to be backfiring, to be counter-effective. It gives people a false sense of security. It has become a tool of pandemic marketing, forcing people. Now governments are openly admitting it, that it was a tool to put pressure on the people to take the vaccines. The DGC itself is undemocratic. It is blackmailing citizens of Europe for their fundamental rights, for their human rights, for their constitutional rights. In some countries, unless you have a DGC, you cannot access your job, you cannot access your supermarket or store, you cannot access public buildings, etc., etc. It is, as I said, not just useless, it is backfiring, and it is basically a license to spread and infect. There is a James Bond movie from the 1980s saying license to kill, and what we have here is an analogy. We have a license to spread and infect. If you're vaccinated, you are considered safe, even though science has proved to us, not just now and in the last months, but before the DGC was even implemented, for example, in the European Parliament in November, there were major scientific evidence in the Lancet and others saying that vaccinated people also can spread the disease almost at the same level as unvaccinated. And this is just one of the evidences. But European institutions continue to ignore this. They continue to ignore these facts. Luckily, some governments, especially recently, have decided to abolish all measures and mandates, and they have set a path to a normal life, or to old normal. And with all this unconstitutional, undemocratic and unscientific behavior, the agents of pandemic marketing, such as President of the Commission von der Leyen, and we have very suspicious information about that, even in the mainstream media now, they continue to promote this madness. Then they now want to extend digital COVID certificate for another year, and we strongly advocate against this. When it comes to vaccine mandates, I must say that some European leaders, such as Mr. Macron from France and Mr. Draghi from Italy, and we have some statements from Austria as well, and these three countries are probably the worst countries when it comes to mandates in Europe, have demonized part of their people that decided that one way of treatment is not best for them, that they want another kind of treatment. They demonized, they ostracized part of their people that simply want to exercise their human rights, their rights to be informed, rights to informed consent, and rights to choose their own therapy. We condemn this, and we simply cannot believe that something like this is happening in Europe in the 21st century. Basically, why would anyone, like Austrian government, want to force their population to take experimental medical product? And the last year has shown to us very low effective, very low quality medical products with plenty of side effects, more than all the other products combined in 30 years, with zero long-term safety. Why would any government in the world or in Europe want to do that, to experiment on its own people, not knowing what will happen in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? It's a total disaster, and we strongly protest against this, and we are also very happy to be proven right, that what we were claiming, and we were claiming what the science showed us, what the practice showed us in the last few months, that we are on a right path, and we are very happy to see that all around the world many governments are lifting their mandates, and that the people are rising to fight for their rights, for their freedoms, that people who are tired of not just health crisis, but economic crisis, democratic deficit, and everything else I have mentioned, What we have here clearly is a pandemic of corruption, and we are determined to get to the bottom of this. And we want European institutions, starting from Ombudsman to many others, to make full investigations. And what we need in Europe is accountability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. I would like to give the floor now to my colleague, Virginie Giron from France.
Merci. Mesdames et messieurs, merci d'être là, parce que pendant que nous sommes tous confortablement assis ici à Strasbourg, mes compatriotes de toute la France sont au froid à Bruxelles pour dénoncer les mesures liberticides mises en place par des gens qui sont dans les mains des lobbies. Comme mes collègues l'ont dit, nous avons besoin de transparence. Mais Madame van der Leyen préfère répondre que les États membres réfléchissent rapidement à la mise en place de l'obligation vaccinale. Pour ce faire, la Commission a décidé sans fondement sanitaire ou scientifique que le certificat Covid européen sera prorogé jusqu'en juin 2023. Rappelons ici que cette date correspond à la fin de la phase clinique 3 de ces vaccins. Oui, nous sommes en pleine étude clinique. Aujourd'hui, plus d'1 million de cas d'effets indésirables sont répertoriés par l'EMA, l'Agence médicale européenne. 1 million sans compter ceux qui ne sont pas transmis, car il y a beaucoup de réticence de la part des médecins à le faire. Dans ces rapports, on voit que des enfants font des AVC, des enfants font des myocardites, des enfants font des péricardites, des enfants font des maladies auto-immunes à cause de vaccins anti-Covid pour une maladie qui ne les concerne pas. Je vais donc redéposer une résolution pour un fonds d'indemnisation des victimes des vaccins anti-Covid. Je remercie d'avance aux décodeurs de fake news de bien faire leur travail, pas comme la dernière fois. Cette résolution a déjà été déposée en septembre. Elle a été balayée d'un revers de la main, même pas débattue, et c'est un scandale. Un jour, tous ces gens, lobbies, gouvernements, technocrates, médias, complices, devront répondre de leurs actes. En attendant, je répondrai simplement à Clément Beaune que le seul convoi de la honte et des égoïstes est celui envoyé par Macron sur des Français qu'il a très envie d'emmerder, sur des Français qui, pour lui, ne sont rien. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much. I would like to take this opportunity. I will be speaking today about transparency, the importance of transparency in the European Union, and I will prove why transparency is so important, especially when we talk about rule of law. Before I start my argument, I would like to take this opportunity to thank a journalist from Germany who did not stop, who did not cave, and who was not afraid to seek the truth. When this journalist, whose name I don't know, and that's not important, saw the news out there in the month of April of 2021 that Ursula von der Leyen signed a contract with Pfizer for 1.8 billion, not million, billion with B, new doses of Pfizer vaccines. The guy requested from the European Commission, based on the regulation, the EU law, that gives you guys access as journalists to documents held by the Commission. So this journalist requested all the communications between the European Commission and between Ursula von der Leyen and the head, the CEO of Pfizer company. The answer that this journalist received from the European Commission was that they cannot give him the personal messages or the direct messages between Ursula von der Leyen and the head, the CEO of Pfizer. The journalist did not stop there. He filed a complaint with the Ombudsman Office. In the month of September of last year, it was publicly announced by the Ombudsman Office that they are starting an investigation. I'm not here to criticize the media, but I have to tell you guys, the Brussels media was only one outlet who reported the story. We as MEPs, we found out 2 weeks afterwards about this investigation. And we start promoting that, and that's how the mainstream media started talking about that investigation. A few weeks ago, the Ombudsman released the conclusions of that investigation. And the Ombudsman Office said, and I quote, there was maladministration. when the European Commission, and implicitly the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, refused to disclose these personal communications between her and the Pfizer CEOs. So my question to all of you, not only of you as journalists, but people who are watching us and who will be watching us, is this the kind of Europe that we want? Where the president, an unelected by the people president of the European Commission, is negotiating personally with the head of a private company that will affect our basic fundamental rights, as all of my colleagues already said. We should, not only that we are entitled by law and by the Treaty of the European Union to have access to these documents, but it should have been her, the first one disclosing this information to us as MEPs, to you as journalists, and to everybody living in the European Union, because we are all affected by these decisions. And that did not happen. So I have to take this opportunity to thank Emily O'Reilly, the European Ombudsman, for not caving, for not stopping, and for actually doing her job. She was pressured. She was threatened. I know the kind of backdoor deals were here in the Parliament. To stop mentioning in all these reports about her activity, do not say anything about the contracts. Backdoor deals. But she did not stop. She did what was supposed to be doing. And that's how we found out that there was maladministration. But this is not enough. You remember a few months ago, in a similar press conference, I showed you the contracts, the way they were released to the public and to US media. After the pharma companies accepted to be released this way. And I will show you some of the pages. This is the contract with Moderna. Pfizer is even worse. At least here you can see the page number. In the contract with Pfizer that was released to the public, you can't even see the page number. So I'm asking all of you, is this transparency? Do US journalists or US people feel safe when the head of the European Commission is negotiating personally with the CEO of a private company, public company, whatever, you know, they have stocks, but it's still a company. It's not a government. It's not a state. We became objects of these people. They strip away our rights because they have commercial agreements. This is unacceptable. So yesterday, we had to vote in the plenary, and you can check the records, on what is called the activities of the European Ombudsman Annual Report for 2020. And I have to congratulate my colleagues from all the groups who included in this report, in the draft report, I would say, before it was put to vote, an article where the Parliament, the European Parliament, is demanding, it's asking, it's urging the European Commission to release not only all the contracts that were released, as I showed you. This is the great transparency in the European Union. The Parliament said in its draft report that all the contracts with these pharmaceutical companies be released, and going forward, the European Commission should not accept a clause in these contracts that they will not be able to release the full content, the full version of these contracts. We were all happy with that article. But we were shocked yesterday morning when we saw an amendment from the EPP group, the European People's Party group. That's not People's Party anymore. The European Special Interest Group. So I will read, and I quote, some of the things that were mentioned in this article, because it's important, especially for US journalists, to have access to correct information in order for you to properly inform the audience. And what they try to do. The first thing mentioned in this report is the following, and I quote, "It is in the interest of the European citizens to have clarity and transparency on the advance purchase agreements and purchase agreements concerning COVID-19 vaccines, and that this must prevail over the request of the manufacturers to introduce non-disclosure clauses. The amendment proposed by EPP was to remove this language. So my question is, why don't they want to have people access to these contracts? Second thing, the European Parliament, it's encouraging the Ombudsman to continue her inquiries and to ask the Commission to publish non-redacted versions of such advanced purchase agreements and purchase agreements. This text was proposed by EPP to be removed from the report. Why? And I'm urging you guys as journalists, ask the leadership of EPP group why they don't want the European citizens and you as journalists to see the contracts, the content of these contracts. The article also says that emphasizes that any lack of transparency in the framework of COVID-19 pandemic is at odds with citizens' rights to information and fuels disinformation and distrust, which is true. We don't know what's in these contracts. Some people contacted me unofficially who said, man, you should not be aware everything is okay. I said, I don't know. I don't know. But just the fact that even us as MEPs, we are not able to see the full version of these contracts, this is a problem in itself. Even this text, they wanted to be removed. And there was another mention where the European Commission was urged to publish, fully publish all these contracts. Also this text was proposed to be removed. But see, people have the power. We mentioned before that we are elected by the people, for the people. So we had a vote yesterday from all the political groups except EPP, who took into consideration the fundamental rights of the European citizens. And this is how they voted. Here's the result of the vote. 187 MEPs, the vast majority from EPP, voted in favor of this amendment to not allow the EU citizens and the journalists to have access to full contracts. On the other side, 506 MEPs voted that these contracts be published, that the European Commission should publish them immediately, and they should not accept any such clauses going forward. I've done a calculation. 27% of the MEPs who voted yesterday voted against transparency, and 72% of the MEPs voted in favor of transparency. These were all across political groups except EPP, from the left to the right. Because we are here for the people. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank again to this journalist from Germany who did not stop and keep pressuring to find out what is going on between these messages that were privately exchanged between the head of the European Commission and the CEO of Pfizer. I would also like to thank my colleagues from all political groups who all fought for the same thing. We all want these contracts to be published. And I think it's time, as all my colleagues said, the European Union right now, it's in a deep crisis. It's in a crisis of leadership, and it is in a crisis of accountability. We already have 2 investigations here that are proving that Ursula von der Leyen is clearly not fit for this office. She committed maladministration on the way she handled that request from the journalist, and 72% of the MEPs just voted yesterday that all of these contracts be published. So I join my colleagues and I publicly demand the immediate resignation of Ursula von der Leyen and allow this union to actually be led by a person who truly believes in the European values, in transparency, and in respect for fundamental rights. Thank you.
Are there any journalists
who would like to ask a question. Just state your name, organisation, and ask a question, please.
My name is Anna Vandeska from Europe Diplomatic. I have two questions for panelists, so it's up to you to choose who feels are appropriate to answer. My first question is that there were a lot of regrets expressed because Madam President von der Leyen didn't come now to debate with the MEPs this time. It's the second time that she didn't come to the Parliament, but she preferred a commercial event promoting vaccine, biotech. So my first question is, do you think that you can explain it with her family relation? Because her husband, Mr. Heiko von der Leyen, is working for vaccine. He's a medical director of a company that is promoting this similar product. And my question to you, don't you think that there is a conflict of interest and she can't express her respect for her husband's work otherwise than using her official position? And the second question is about a situation in Canada, because there was a martial law introduced to quell the protest of vaccine skeptics, because the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, said that it's unacceptable to mistrust the vaccine, and so now he declared martial law, and people can be kept without a lawyer for 90 days, and there can be mass arrests conducted, because last time there was this situation against the terrorist groups. There were 300 perquisitions, je ne sais pas les noms, and 500 people were, there were mass arrests, and people stayed 90 days without lawyer. So my question is it appropriate to suppress human rights in a country which is a strategic partner to the European Union? I was asking this question here the whole day yesterday. I didn't get an answer.
Thank you so much. I would like to give the floor to my colleague Stassis, because he spoke about this personal relationship between Ursula's husband and some of these pharma companies.
Yeah, thank you, Cristiano. Thank you for the question. For me, it's clearly a conflict of interest, especially in this situation when this pandemic is managed in the way it is managed, promoting certain products at the expense of other products, treatments, etc. So Mr. Heiko von der Leyen, as I mentioned, is employed or advising not one but two companies. One of them has a relationship through the personnel with Pfizer. Then the common shareholders, some of them are in the company he works, and also shareholders of Pfizer. The other company is the entrance into the European healthcare, that means medical market. For me, it's a clear conflict of interest. She cannot perform her duties free of this conflict of interest. So, and in addition, you know, her participation now in some commercial event, continuing to promote vaccination, so performing as a sales representative of this vaccination business plan is, of course, a disaster, I think. So at least she doesn't promote now the mandatory vaccination. She mentioned that in December 1st, you know, that we should start discussion on mandatory vaccination in the European Union. I hope it's not happening, and I hope she will listen to what we say here and appreciate. We'll address, of course, the institution, European institutions, about this conflict of interest, but just to inform the public, to inform you that our position is that she's in a deep, massive conflicts of interest, not one, but several. Thank you.
I think you can come here and answer the question about Canada. Okay.
If you want to go first with that question, go ahead. Okay. I'm sorry I'm late, but as you can see, I'm a little indisposed. And I have to say, wow, so much has happened since our press conference back in November of last year. And I've been told by so many people that because of my clear stance on defending freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, that I've given a lot of people hope. This is flattering, of course, but it is only part of the story. What we have seen since November is absolutely incredible. People are voicing their opinion on government overreach. They're taking to the street, protesting these illiberal COVID mandates, and they're challenging their governments in ever-increasing numbers.
In Germany, thousands and thousands of people take strolls every Monday night in hundreds of cities all across the country to express to the German government that they will not tolerate being stripped of their civil rights. In Australia, Italy, France, Austria, New Zealand, and Belgium, in pretty much every Western country of the world. People are rising to defend freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. And they're doing so despite democratic governments' desperate attempt to shut these protests down by forbidding them, intimidating protesters with brute police force and water cannons, criminalizing governments, critics even going so far as to arresting them. And out of all of these movements, it is the Canadian truckers that stand out and shine brightest. Because it was the Canadian truckers, their boldness, their courage, their determination to stand up to their governments. And it was they who inspired so many others all over the world to finally come together and be determined to put a stop to governments tearing down the very foundation of our democracies. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is this. While I might have given hope to people, like I said, it's only half the story, because the other part of the story is this. I, too, needed hope. I, too, needed to know that I am not the only one fighting this fight. We all needed this hope. We all did. And this is what you have given us. Hope. Hope that not all is lost yet. Hope that freedom and democracy can still be restored. And it is that hope that nurtures my strength and my determination to keep up fighting on my end of the bargain. Because it is not enough for a handful of MEPs to stand up and toggle this fight. It is not enough. We need you, the people, because you are so infinitely more powerful when it comes to convincing governments that they are not doing the right thing. So please, first of all, thank you for doing all of this, for paying us the strength we need to do our job here. But please stand up to your governments and follow the brave Canadian truckers' lead. They did exactly the right thing. Thank you.
Any more questions from journalists, please? Just any more? Yeah.
No, but
yourself,
sorry,
please.
I don't find that the speech is answer to my question. Sorry, I would like to have an answer to my question. It was very precise.
I can answer to,
no, but Mr.
Mr.
Tavares,
Therese.
I can answer to your question. Yes.
It was very precise.
Short and sweet.
In regards to the first thing, the conflict of interest, we are not prosecutors here. So I will not go into saying if that's a conflict of interest or not. We have the EPP's office, which is led by Laura Codruța-Kövesi, the brave Romanian, who in Romania investigated people for an alleged bribery of 2, 3, 10 euros. So this office should be the one investigating exactly what is happening with these contracts. But I'm not going into that. That's the top of the law enforcement. That's the issue, that's the issue and the subject that should be dealt by the law enforcement agencies. What I'm talking about is the appearance of a conflict of interest. The fact that Ursula von der Leyen is negotiating personally on behalf of the European Union when her husband is already involved in that business, that's a problem in itself. And in any democracy around the world, something like that would have happened, she would have been investigated by the national parliament. I don't think that will happen here, because everything here is done, as I said, based on backdoor deals and compromises. As far as your second question, what is happening right now in Canada? Look, besides the relationship, the economical relationship and partnership that Canada has with the EU, Canada is a member of NATO. And we see what is happening right now in Ukraine. We see the whole Western world right now being shaken up by people who are disliking us for various reasons. The strength of the Western world is not the army, it's not the economy. We see countries right now, emerging countries, that have stronger economies than any economy in the EU. What made us strong over the history, and I'm talking about the Western world, were the values. The respect for basic fundamental rights, the understanding that the government is there to serve you as citizen, as a person, not for you to serve the government. And what the Prime Minister of Canada, the way he's behaving right now, he's exactly like a tyrant, like a dictator. He's like Ceausescu in Romania. If even you doubt, if you raise doubts about the vaccines, you're outcasted. What's the difference between what he does and what happened under the Inquisition? See, on one side they say, well, we should not believe in God, but on the other side they say, believe in science. We don't have to. Science is not about belief. Science is about measurements, conclusions, hypotheses, and arguments. We got to a point right now where even if you say something, if you raise any doubts, you're already considered, as whatever, they label you in very different ways. This is not okay. And I have to tell you, that when I saw the protests in Canada, the way the truckers over there reacted, I got in touch with some of them, others contacted me, I congratulated them, and I want to use this opportunity to thank them, and I hope this movement for freedom and for rights is spreading all around the world, because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that all these elected officials, they understand that they were elected in those offices to work for the people, not to behave like masters of slaves. Thank you.
I'll just finish off. Any more journalists? Any more questions? Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for coming here today. So everybody safe home. God bless. Thank you. Bye-bye.